Hello friends, so we are going to start this chapter 3 Democratic Politics class 9th Constitutional Design. Friends, in this chapter we will be seeing why constitution is needed, and we will also see some thing about the Indian constitution, the constituent assembly, and the preamble, all those things friends. But before that, some few points are some few lines are here which are important, that in a democracy rulers are not free to do what they like. That means limitations of the government. This is what the one of the important feature of democracy we discussed in the last chapter. Then there are certain basic rules that the citizen and the government have to follow, and this is what given in the constitution friends. Okay, anyways, now let us come to yes, one more thing, that constitution is the supreme law of the country, and it determines the rights of the citizens and the powers of the government and how the government should function. So this should be kept in mind friends. Now let us start the chapter friend. So the first thing is that democratic constitution in South Africa, you should read it on your own because it is largely historical. The only thing is that apartheid was there, that means the whites were oppressing the black people, so much discrimination was against them, and after a long war, finally freedom was won from there for them, and there was a democracy set up. Now friends, let us come to this, why do we need a constitution, and why do we need a constitution? This can be answered by seeing one debate of this South African constitution making itself, because the oppressor and the oppressed in this new democracy were planning to live together as equals. As equals, now they are going to live, but one was oppressed and the other was oppressor. So this is one challenge, and both have trust deficit because of being oppressor and oppressed, this relationship. Now the thing is that there are also some challenges for those, that both the parties have their own concerns and interests. For example, black majority people, they wanted that the democratic principle of majority rule should be there, the majority rule should be there, but then the white people have the concern that they were in the minorities. Then again, these people wanted socio-economic rights, black people, but now if we see from the side of white minority people, they wanted that their privilege and property should be protected. So there was clash of interest between both the people. Okay, uh, but there was to be a compromise, and there was, in fact, there was a compromise also. For example, the blacks agreed that the majority rule would not be absolute, that is, the rights of the minorities will also be protected. The whites agreed to the principle of majority rule, and the blacks agreed that okay, majority rule will not be absolute. So there was a compromise between both. So this is how the compromise was achieved within those people, and you will understand these things while going to this paragraph friends. But now see friends, what I am going to argue is that how this compromise was going to be implemented, and how they managed to trust each other. So how the trust was going to be there with those people, among those people. So this was the challenge, and here the role of constitution comes. Okay, that is, the way to build and maintain trust in such a situation is to write a constitution, basic rules, some basic rules that everyone would abide by, and those basic rules could not be easily altered by any of the parties. Okay, so then the role of constitution comes. This is how we can understand why constitution is very important friends. Now let us see some directly why the constitution is needed. The constitution is a set of written rules that are accepted by all people living together in a country. See friends, Indian constitution is also accepted by all people living in the country, of every caste or religion, or of every section of the society. They have faith in the Indian constitution, and that's why Indian constitution is very successful after even 70 years. Second thing is that constitution is the supreme law that determines the relationship among people living in a territory, and also relationship between people and government. So among people, the relationship, the best example is untouchability, that one people will not practice untouchability against other people. This is how the constitution of India has defined people to people relation. Again, people to and government relation has also been defined, that there will be fundamental rights, right to freedom of expression, and the government will not take away freedom of expression. Okay, so this is how the constitution is has defined relationship between people and people, and then people and government between them. Now let us see what the constitution does. The first thing is that it builds a degree of trust. The trust is that the constitution has granted the rights to me, and it will not be taken away by any people. This is the trust. This is where the trust, okay, the constitution has given me these rights, and no majority people will take away these rights from me. So the trust is there, and that's why there is faith in the constitution, and that's why there is coordination among the people, coordination for the socio-economic transformation development of the country, friends. Then the second thing is that it specifies how the government will be constituted. That means the content and intent of the government will be taken care of by the constitution. Then the third is that it means that the structure of government and the powers of the jurisdiction of the government, that will be defined. Then the third is that it lays down the limitations on the governments and tells us what the rights of the citizens are there, for example fundamental rights. And the fourth is that it expresses the aspirations of the people about creating a good society. For example, preamble of the Indian constitution says that there will be justice, social, economic and political, there will be universal brotherhood, there will be liberty, equality, freedom, all these values are there. Secular country we will be having. So these are the aspirations of the people for building a good society. This is how the constitution has various roles, friends. So it defines the aspirations of the people, it defines the limitations of the government and the rights of the citizens, it defines the structure of the government, and it also builds a degree of trust and coordination. Why the degree of trust? That the constitutionally granted rights will not be taken away by any people. Okay, this is the trust. Now friends, let us come to making of the Indian constitution, friends. Before that, I must tell you in this here on the sides of these pages, people of important personalities, something have been given. You must read, and also you should read about those persons on internet or other sources, because in GS paper 1 also, in written examination, important personalities has been explicitly mentioned, friends. So such things are important for you. Now let us come to the making of the constitution. It was constituted framed in a very difficult situation. Partition of India was there, and of course so many princely states were there. Partition was there, princely states were there, so their integration was challenged. Given these difficulties, the constitution of India was prepared. Now see friends, there was one big advantage for the makers of the Indian constitution, and that big advantage was that during the course of freedom struggle itself, what will be the ideals and values of the constitution, how we are going to constitute a democratic India, the consensus on these issues were already developed during the freedom struggle itself, friends. This is one very good example of a benefit to India, because in India the freedom struggle was not against a foreign rule only. It was a struggle to rejuvenate our country and to transform our society and politics, and that's why we were also planning how our society should be, how our politics should be. That is a democratic society we want. So this is how much of the consensus evolved during the freedom struggle itself, and that's why it was very easier for we people to frame our constitution. We can see the example of this Motilal Nehru Committee report of 1928 and the 1931 Karachi session resolution. In these at these places also we can find that there were emphasis on universal adult franchise, then right to freedom and equality, to protecting the rights of minorities in the Constitution of India. All these things, all these major issues on which consensus was already built up, that we want to have this. Though there were differences on how to achieve these things, but we want to achieve these things. The consensus on these things were built, friends. Okay. The second thing is that while we were building the constitution, we adopted parliamentary democracy. So why we adopted? Because we were familiar with the political institutions of the colonial rule, in which there was some sort of parliamentary democracy type of system. That's why Westminster type of democracy we are having. Okay, friends. Now see, the next important aspect is that in India, in case of India, the Constitution of India has many things drawn from Government of India Act 1935, and in fact this is one question asked in written examination also, that the Constitution and the Government of India Act 1935 was the blueprint for this Constitution of India. So this is very important, friend, and here that's why I always say NCERT gives you some glimpses into the important topics for civil services, friends. Anyways, now let us come to next discussion, friend. While we were framing our constitution, our path to constitution making was there. We were also influenced by various important events like French Revolution, liberty, equality, freedom in preamble. Similarly, Bill of Rights in US, that was fundamental rights incorporated in our constitution. Then parliamentary democracy from Britain was taken. Similarly, we have taken many features from various constitutions of the world. Friend, here one debate for written examination comes, that India has a borrowed constitution. Should we say India has a borrowed constitution? Justify this. So this may be one important point for written examination also, friends. Uh, in fact, our constitution framers, they studied various constitutions of the world and saw their working for the past several years, and then they adopted those things from those constitutions which were suited to the Indian needs, friends. So these things should be kept in mind. Now let us come to the Constituent Assembly, friends. And Constituent Assembly, in this case, uh, some factuals are there, friend. I hope you will read these factuals. Okay. Now let us see some important conceptual aspects, friend. The first question is that the Constituent Assembly was there some 70 years back, 50 years here written, but 70 years back the constitution was framed. So why we should accept that constitution written 70 years before? So this is one question. So this is because it expresses a broad consensus of its time. During that time, a broad consensus was there. How we are going to have a structure of the government, how we are going to have values, how we are going to govern ourselves, what will be the intent of our governance. All these things, a broad consensus was already developed at that time, and that was very advanced. Even today, they are very much relevant, friends. Liberty, equality, freedom, all these things are relevant, very much relevant even today. That's why even today we are following the constitution framed 70 years before, friends. Uh, Now let us come to uh, the second reason for accepting the constitution is that the Constituent Assembly represented the people of India. This is one debate. Many people say that Constituent Assembly was not directly elected by the people, not directly chosen by the people of India. This is also one important point for prelims. It was not directly elected by the people of India. So was this representative of the people of India? So this is one question. So it is said that yes, though it were Constituent Assembly was elected by the members of the existing provincial legislatures, but it was representative of the people of India because it had a fair geographical share of members from different parts of the country. People were there. Also, there were members from different language and groups and castes. So it was representative, friends. Okay. One debate is also there in Constituent Assembly. There was dominance of Congress. So see, friends, the dominance of Congress before the constitution and after the constitution is different. I mean to say Indian National Congress before independence and after independence are different. Today it is a political party, but before independence it was not a political party as such. Rather, in the same Indian National Congress there were people who were rightist, leftist, centrist, all shades of opinion were there in the Indian National Congress. So it was highly inclusive, friends. So we cannot say that there was dominance of INC. It is not. It will be very harsh to say this. Also, the thing is that the way the Constituent Assembly worked. See, friends, the way the Constituent Assembly worked is also very important because it gives sanctity to the institution. You will see that there were so many debates in the Constituent Assembly, and also the consensus-based decision making was there. It was a very systematic and open way of functioning, friends. More than 2000 amendments were considered, friends. Clause by clause discussion was there. Every document presented and every word spoken has been written in the Constituent Assembly records, and these are called CA debates, Constituent Assembly debates, friends. So the process was largely consensus based, and so much debates were occurring at that time. So we cannot say that there was dominance of one particular party or one particular person. Okay. Also, friends, the importance of Constituent Assembly debates is also there because it helps in understanding the rationale behind every provision of the constitution, why that provision has been inserted in the constitution. The rationale behind that we can find in the debates, Constituent Assembly debates, and that helps in interpretation of the meaning of the constitution also, and Supreme Court often takes help of Constituent Assembly debates, friends. Now let us come to the guiding values of the Indian Constitution, friends. So in this case we are going to study about the philosophy of the constitution. So two way we can know the philosophy: one, the constitution itself saying what it wants to have, and the other players who have read the constitution or they are giving some comments on the constitution, so they can also define the philosophy of our constitution. But we will see from the side of constitution itself, friends. In fact, Gandhiji, he was not a member of Constituent Assembly, friends. Remember this. but he spelled out how he wanted the constitution to be. And in this, if you will read these things, you will see that in fact what he was emphasizing on was elimination of the inequality, and in fact this is what Ambedkar is also trying to have this the inequality removed. But end, both are having same opinion that inequality should end, Gandhi and Ambedkar. But the debate is that how it should be removed, how inequality should be removed. So there are some controversies and debates between Ambedkar and Gandhi. Now see friends, Ambedkar has also said one very good thing, that on this 26th January 1950 we are going to enter a life of contradictions in politics. In politics we have equality, but in social and economic life we have still inequality. So he said that there are three dimensions of democracy: the political one, where one person, one value, one vote, that is done. But in case of economy and in case of society, still we are not having that equality, friends. In fact, there is inequality. So this is what Ambedkar's opinion, friends. Anyways, now let us come to the next important thing, philosophy of the constitution. And for this we will be reading the preamble as such. So these terms that we are going to study, we the people of India, it means that the constitution has been drawn up and enacted by the people through their representatives, and it has not been imposed by we people, friends, mind it. We the people of India, see, we the people of India, okay, we the people of India adopt, enact and give to ourselves this constitution. That means the people of India have adopted, enacted and gave to them this constitution. So the people are supreme, they are even above the constitution, friends. Okay, now the other terms, let us see. This is how sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic we want to have. Sovereign means no external influence will be there, no external power can dictate government of India. Then the term socialist, friends, socialist is also there. Wealth should be generated socially and should be shared equally by the society, meaning that there should be no concentration of wealth in one person. Okay, that's why we have adopted this mixed economy concept also. Government should regulate the ownership of land and industry to reduce the socio-economic inequalities. So inequalities should be minimized. This is what our socialism is. Our socialism is different from this communism and Russian socialism, friends. Anyways, secular means freedom of religion. Okay, all religion, beliefs and practices should be treated with equal respect. This is what secular is. Then democratic, we know, I don't need to explain that. Then republic, that also you know from your childhood days, 26th January. Anyways, justice, citizens cannot be discriminated on the basis of caste, religion and gender. So this is what it is, friends. Justice, social, economic and political. Social inequalities has to be reduced. The government should work for the welfare of the all and especially of the disadvantaged groups. Justice means fair share should be given to all. Fairness should be there, no discrimination should be there. This is how it is. So this is also one of our goal. See friends, preamble is the first page of the constitution, and it gives us a glimpse of the constitution, that what we will be what we will find in the constitution. Okay, like in every book we have a preface, so it is a preface of the constitution. Anyways, second is the liberty of thought, expression, belief, faith and worship. So no unreasonable restriction will not be there. It means that reasonable restrictions can be there. Okay, in some cases your liberty can be curtailed. Lockdown, one example, where your freedom to movement has been curtailed, but this is reasonable restriction, not unreasonable restrictions should be there. Okay, then we have equality means all are equal before the law. The traditional social inequalities are not there, that these people are from lower caste, upper caste, this religion, that religion. These things are not going to happen, because in the eyes of law everyone is equal, friends. Okay, and everyone should have equal opportunity for all, and that's why there is reservation policy also, that is positive discrimination, so that there is equal opportunity for all, friends. Then we have this term fraternity, assuring the dignity of individual and the unity and integrity of the nation. Fraternity means there should be feeling of brotherhood, friends. There should be feeling of oneness, that we are the members of the same family, something like this, friends. This is how the philosophy of the Indian constitution is. And now friends, to end, we will see the institutional design. So any constitution that provides the institutional design, that how what will be the structure of the government, what will be the content and intent of the government, how the decision will be taken, how much powers are going to be vested, these things are there in the constitution. It is the institutional design that our constitution has provided for. For example, parliament, Vidhan Sabha, these things are there. The various independent institutions like election commission, CAG, these things are there with various mandate. So in this institutional design has also been given in details in the Indian Constitution. Friends, one more thing that I should discuss before wrapping up, that the Constitution felt that people's aspirations and changes in society are always dynamic. People's aspirations change and society is also changing entity. That's why the Constitution should not be static, should not be sacred, should not be unalterable. That's why there are provisions for constitutional amendments also, friends. And that's why our Constitution is organic and it has kept itself updated. It has kept itself changed according to the needs of the time, and that's why over 100 amendments are there in the Indian Constitution. This is how we can see, friends. So I hope you people enjoyed this chapter, friends, and your comments are always welcome. Thank you. So now let us study this chapter 4, electoral politics, and we have seen that how election has a very important role in ensuring democracy, that it should provide real choice to people and also free and fair elections should be conducted. Now in this chapter we are going to study about how electoral competition is important. These are this one, and then we will see how election in India is democratic and what are the challenges to free and fair elections. These are some important topics of this chapter. In fact, since we are adopting, we have an indirect democracy, representative democracy, so elections are there to be held, but that election should be democratic. So in this light we are going to study this chapter. So the this topic I think you will read on your own. So now let us come to next one. Why do we need elections? So similar, it has 2 points. One is that we have indirect democracy, representative democracy. That's why we need elections to be held. And the second is that for every citizen it is not possible for having time and knowledge to take decisions on all matters. So this is other reason that elections are needed. In fact, when elections are there, the voters are making choices. They can choose who will make laws for them. They can choose who will form government and take major decisions. And also those party, they will choose the party whose policies will guide the government and lawmaking. Here I can cite manifestos. Election manifestos are provided by the political parties. So the voters, when they are voting that political party to power, it means that they are supporting the policies of that party mentioned in the manifesto. So voters are making choices that who will make laws for them, who will make major decisions, and who are going to what policies will guide the government and lawmaking. So this is how while having elections, these things are there. I am cursorily doing these things because these are not very much difficult for you people to study. Friends, I hope you will study chapters line by line on your own. Okay. Now let us see what makes an election democratic. This is important aspect. What makes election and democratic? And we have seen already 2 conditions are important. Real choice should be there and free and fair election should be conducted. Now let us see the minimum conditions of a democratic election. If an election is said to be democratic, minimum conditions should be there. The first thing is that everyone should be able to choose. This means that everyone should have one vote and every vote should have equal value. So political equality should be there. This is the first criteria for a democratic election. This is very important. And political equality, we discussed it. Then the second is that there should be something to choose from. That means real choice should be there. Real choice to the voter. In case of China, we saw how certain candidates affiliated to that party were able to contest elections. But in case of India, anyone above 25 can fight for Lok Sabha elections. Of course, some conditions are there. But in general, people and candidates are, parties and candidates are free to contest elections in India. So real choice is there in case of India. So this is also one important criteria. We are in fact discussing this. What makes an election democratic? This one we are discussing. So 2 things we discussed. Now the third is that the choice should be offered at irregular intervals. That means elections are held at every 5 years. Now what if elections are held after 20 years? So it does not make any sense. So elections should be held regularly after every few years. Okay, then that's why it will give a chance to the voters and the people to judge the function and the performance of the government, whether the ruler should continue or should go. Then the fourth is that the candidates should be preferred by the people, who are preferred by the people should get elected, and that's why the first past post system, that is the candidate getting highest vote will get elected. Then the fifth is election should be conducted in a free and fair manner where people can choose as they really wish. Okay, and that's why we have said that one yardstick for this is that ruling party should have fair chance of losing. Even ruling party should have fair chance of losing the elections. So these things are there, and when these 4 5 things are there, we can say that yes, elections are democratic. So these are very important, and you should keep in mind. Now another debate that comes is it good to have political competition? So see, when political competition is there, then there is some problems also. A sense of disunity is there, factionalism is there in every locality. On the basis of caste line, religion line, we get divided. So division of the society can be there, and sometimes that division is quite irrational also. So political competition is something which is seen as negative, and that's why we often say that party politics as a bad word we use. Dirty tricks used by people to win elections. So in one sense we can see that electoral fights and this electoral competition does not allow sensible long term policies to be formulated. Rather the focus is on short term, how to win the elections. This is the only thing. So this is demerit of this political competition. But the thing is that even then our framers chose to go for free competition elections. Why? Because they thought that even if they were knowing that yes, political competition will lead to these problems, factionalism and all this short-term populism, all these things, but they went for this electoral competition because it will serve the society in the longer run. In the longer run, and various good arguments are given here. You can read, but the thing is that friends, because political parties in real life, they are motivated by desire to advance their political careers. They want to remain in power and positions, so they will serve the people. This is one thing. But one very good thing, example, yes, here. Let us come to this point. The rest I am leaving for you people to study. Some arguments are very good arguments are given. They know that if they raise issues that people want to be raised, their popularity and chance of victory will increase in the next elections. So this is one thing that regular electoral competition provides incentives to political parties and leaders, that yes, they will raise the problems of the people, they will raise the choices of the people, the needs of the people, and that's why they will be able to get the vote of the people. So if a political party is motivated only by desire to win power, even if it will be forced to serve the people, because one good example, shopkeeper, if is interested in profit only, even then the good service will have to be provided to the customers. Otherwise the customers will go to some other shopkeeper. This is what electoral political competition is about. If one party and one candidate is not able to fulfill the needs of the people, to serve the people, then the people will go to some other party. So this is how political competition is very important. Now let us come to what is our system of elections. So this is largely factual, and I will not be taking in details. By-election and general election, I think you know. By-election is mid-term election, general election is after every 5 years. Electoral constituencies, let us come to this point. So electoral constituency in India is area based. This is one point that we have to keep in mind, area based. Voters who live in an area, they elect that representative. Voters of that area, they vote for. Now one important aspect is that one of the features of the democratic election is that every vote should have equal value. That is why constitution requires that constituency should also represent roughly equal population. That means one MP is representing 10 lakh population, then another MP from another constituency should also represent 10 lakh population. This is how population based constituency is there. Similarly, at the third tier, in local bodies, we can see now we have wards level constituencies also, ward committees in Panchayati Raj and in urban local bodies. Now let us come to the next important aspect, that is reserved constituencies. Here it is very important because in fact there are some constituencies reserved for scheduled caste and scheduled tribes, some weaker sections. This is because weaker sections may not have the required resources, education and contacts to contest the election. So other influential and resourceful person may prevent them from winning the elections. Now if these people are not winning elections, so it means that parliament or assemblies will be deprived of representation from certain section, SC and ST. And we know that in a democracy, the most important yardstick is that whenever there is a decision making and those who are getting affected should also have a say in that decision making. Now SC and ST candidates are not getting represented in parliament, then their say will not be there. Therefore reserved constituencies are there for them so that they get representation in parliament and assemblies. A special system of reserved constituencies for them has been provided. So this is one thing. Now the second aspect we have to see is voters list. But before going to voters list, let us see some thing. Yes, their number is in proportion to the share in total population. This is one point, that the number of seats allotted to SC and ST is in proportion to the proportion of their total population. This is important for prelims also. And now one more point I can cite is 1/3 of the seats are reserved in rural and urban local bodies for women candidates. This is in case of 73rd and 74th Amendment Act. Now see, voters list, everyone who is above 18 will get enrolled. This is how we know. You read all these things. But one thing that I would emphasize is that it is not that everyone above 18 will get enrolled in voter list. In fact, some criminals and persons with unsound mind can also be denied this getting enrolled in this voter list, and the right to vote can be denied to those persons. So it is not that all person above 18 will be part of voter list. So this should be kept in mind. Now these things also I hope you will read. These are factuals. EPIC के बारे में लिखा है कि how electoral election photo identity card came and all those things. But one thing, EPIC when came, it stopped impersonation. That is Mr. A voting for Mr. B. That was quite common in past. But now after EPIC, this impersonation has been done away with. Now let us come to some other aspects. Yes, Supreme Court in 2003 perhaps, in one of its verdicts said that every candidate must, while filing the nomination, should give details of the criminal antecedent, their assets and liabilities, their educational qualification. What is the purpose of this? That the candidate, the people who are voting for the candidate should have a prior information about that candidate, that see, this person has this much educational qualification, asset, liability or criminal antecedents. That's why the voters will be able to make an informed choice. So informed choice is very important. That's why Supreme Court has asked that filing nomination paper, at that time this information should also be furnished. In fact, here one question for written examination can be that what is the role of Supreme Court in promoting electoral reforms? So this can be one point where we can see. Yes, now the next debate is educational qualification of candidates. We often say that why there is no qualification for candidates, there should be. But some good arguments here written. The first is that educational qualification is not needed for all kinds of jobs. For example, for cricket, no educational qualification is required. In fact, I can cite. Okay, I will tell you later. The second argument is that even if education was relevant, even if education would be made some qualification, even then the choice should be left to the people, whether they want literate person or illiterate person, educated or uneducated person as the representative. And I can cite one example from Tamil Nadu, K. Kamaraj. He was illiterate, not educated. Even then he was the choice of the people, and he was a very good leader, and he was a very good administrator also. So it means that from this example we can see that educational qualification does not mean that only then that candidate will serve the people and will be a good administrator or good representative. So education need not show. The third is that if education qualification was given, in that case, if educational qualification was given for contesting election, many people would get disqualified at this stage itself. Why? Because literacy rate in India is very low. Very few percentage is even graduate today, today also. So these 3 points are going against educational qualification being provided for contesting elections. And one more thing, education does not mean that a person will be taking good decisions. One good example is me and you. We go to the market and take plastic. Even knowing that plastic is bad for environment, we ask for plastic. Shopkeeper, please give me this in plastic. Polythene. So this is how we can say that education and literacy does not mean that that person will always take good decisions. Okay. So these are some arguments that why education should not be made a qualification for contesting elections. It would also curtail the real choice, one argument we give. Now election campaign is there. Election campaign is important. This is how the informed public opinion is building, information is provided to the people. Election campaign, people talk about their achievement, what they have done. Government says yes, we have done this and we have done that. Opposition parties points out the criticism of the government. And also election campaign gives a chance to the political parties who are contesting elections to come with their manifesto, the policies, all these things. So election campaign in fact helps information to spread, to disseminate, and a healthy debate, discussion among the people is there, that this party is saying that, this party is saying that, this party has done this party has done this. So this is how an informed choice making, decision making is facilitated by election campaign. This is how it is, and you should read this. In fact, election campaign provides some agenda also. For example, Garibi Hatao, Save Democracy, these things are there. So election campaign is very important. I am leaving this thing also for you people to read, because conceptually it is not very difficult. Yes, one thing, that it is sometimes necessary to regulate the election campaign, because during election campaign, hate speech, last time recently we saw hate speeches were there. So it was something like promoting communalism. So this thing should not be done. That's why election campaign should be allowed in every fashion it want to go, but it should be fair, it should give equal chance to competition, and there should not be malpractices, there should be some regulation in fact. So this regulation is in two fashion. One is through the election law, Representation of People Act. It says that bribing the voters should not be there, appealing to vote in the name of caste or religion should not be there, use of government resources for election campaign should not be there. Then there are expenditure cap on candidates, not on political parties as of now. And after these regulations or election campaign, as per law, there is one also model code of conduct. This is not a statutory. The above what we discussed is a statutory, Representation of People Act 1951. But this model code of conduct is not a statutory. That is, rather it has been consensus built between political parties and election commission. Okay, these are the guidelines, we will be following these guidelines, but it has no law, legal backing or statutory backing. Anyways, so as per this model code of conduct also, any place of worship for election propaganda cannot be used. Similarly, use of government vehicles, aircraft should not be used. These are model code of conduct. Once elections are announced, ministers cannot lay foundation stone for any project, so welfare measures cannot be announced, otherwise it may influence the public opinion. So these things are prohibited under model code of conduct. Now polling and counting of votes, you will read this is not so much difficult. Yes, one debate is there, in election too much amount is spent, so is it good or not? So it is one debate that you will be thinking of, and give your opinion if you want to tell me. Now let us come to what makes election in India democratic. So before coming to this point, let us first see that there are many problems, malpractices we often find in newspaper about the elections in India, such as inclusion of false name, exclusion of genuine names, then misuse of power, misuse of money power, muscle power. All these things are there. Intimidation of voters, rigging of voting things. All these negative things are there. So the question arises. Many questions arises. What questions are these? Can a party win an election and come to power not because it has popular support, rather because it is able to have electoral malpractices? So this is a vital question. Will a candidate win by malpractices, or will be elected by popular support? So this is one debate triggered by these above problems that we see in news, okay, that we discussed. But here we will see that though in newspaper we may find such negative aspects, muscle power, money power, cash for vote, all those debates are there, liquor for vote, all these things are there. Even then, in India, election is democratic, largely democratic, because of three reasons. One is the Independent Election Commission, and then the other is the voter turnout rate, and the third and very important is that acceptance of the election results. So now let us start. So Independent Election Commission is there. So there should be one commission, one institution that should regulate the election and get the election done free and fair. This is very important, and for this one independent institution is required, and Article 324 of Indian Constitution provides for Election Commission of India for direction, control and superintendence of elections. Now, are they really independent? This is one important thing. If they are not independent of the government, then there will be undue pressure by the ruling party and undue advantage taken by the ruling party. For example, they will push the election commission to announce election dates as per their convenience. So ruling party and the government should not have influence on the commission. That is, they should be independent of the government's influence. Do they have enough powers? Now they should have enough powers also. For example, if hate speech is there, election campaign is getting a bit away from the regular track. So in that case, election commission should be able to take action. For example, in case of hate speeches, election commission said that those persons who made hate speeches will not be giving speeches for 48 hours or 72 hours. So this is how election commission should have powers to conduct free and fair elections. And then the thing is that if they have powers, are they really using their powers, or they are only having powers but they are not using powers? And this was also in case of hate speech, that they were not acting on hate speeches. Then the Supreme Court prompted that why you are not acting. Then they put a ban of 48 hours or 72 hours on those people who are giving hate speeches. So whether they are using their powers or not, that is also a very important question. So this is how we have to think, friends. Anyways, now let us see whether the institution is independent or not. So it is independent, and also it is very powerful. Undoubtedly it is powerful, and it enjoys some kind of independence. No, though it is a debate whether election commission of India has that much independence like CAG, but in fact CAG like independence is not enjoyed by election commission. For example, the expenditure of election commission is not charged on the consolidated fund of India. Anyways, we will study it in polity, Indian constitution. So as of now, we can see that chief election commissioner is appointed by President of India, but once appointed, it not answerable to the President of government, because he is not removed by President or government. Rather, he is removed by Parliament now, and on the grounds and in the like manner as a Supreme Court judge. So this is how the chief election commissioner is not accountable to the President or government, rather accountable, rather independent from them. Okay. The second is that very few election commissions in the world have such wide-ranging powers as Election Commission of India. So they have wide-ranging of powers also. Anyways, now let us see. Yes, before coming to next aspect, independence of an institution means the security of tenure should be there. Second thing is that there should be finances. Similarly, the powers should be there to enjoy those powers. Anyways, this is one debate, that how an institution can be said to be independent. So this is important for your written examination. Now let us come to the next. Election Commission's wide-ranging powers of Election Commission. Election Commission takes decision on various aspects of conduct and control of elections, from the announcement of elections to the declaration of results. We note this. They implement model code of conduct. They punish any candidate or party if they violate it. Okay. During the election period, chief election commissioner can order government to follow guidelines, and in fact misuse of government power to enhance its chance to win elections is also taken care of. That's why if the government is going to announce some welfare scheme, then they have to take permission of election commission, and election commission can even deny that no, you cannot announce this measure or that measure, you cannot take this decision or that decision. So this is how election commission keeps a check on the government actions, so that they are not taking undue advantage of their ruling because they are ruling. Also, one thing is important: when election commission when the model code of conduct is in force and election is going on, in that case the government employees are not employees of the government, rather they are employees of the election commission, and election commission can do transfer posting of those people, including higher officials, DAM, SP. Sometimes controversy on DGP also came. Anyways, in the last 15 years, election commission has done very good thing. So in somehow we can see that election commission has proven to be independent and powerful. So this is how we can conclude that election commission is independent and is conducting free and fair elections, taking many steps, and also some constitutional arrangements are there for the election commission, that there should be security of tenure, for example appointed by President, chief election commissioner, but can be removed by Parliament only. So these things are there to make that commission independent. So this is one criteria, that helps in free and fair election. Then the popular participation is there, friends. The popular participation is that the turnout figure is increasing. We can see how turnout figure is increasing in case of India and decreasing in case of UK. So turnout is increasing. It means that people have faith in they have faith in election process in India. Now in India, people feel that through elections they can bring pressure on political parties to adopt policies and programs. So this is how they have faith that by through their votes they can put pressure on the government and political parties to take some measures for those people and to take care of their needs. Okay, so this is how voter turnout. Then the third is acceptance of election outcome. In fact, election outcome in India, even though those people who lose elections, even they said that yes, it is people's verdict and we accept this. And also we can see that many a times ruling party itself routinely losing elections. It means the fair chance of ruling party losing election is also there. That's why we can say that in fact there is acceptance of election outcomes in India, and this gives legitimacy to the election process, and that's why it can be said to be democratic, free and fair. Now there are challenges to the free and fair elections also, friends, and muscle power, money power, we often see these things. So challenges to free and fair elections are many. For example, is election really providing level playing field for all people? In fact, it is very difficult. We as me or you as a common citizen may find it very difficult to contest for elections and win the elections. So level playing field may not be there. So there are some points we can see that how free and fair elections cannot be there. In fact, free and fair elections have challenges. One is that candidates and parties who have lot of money, they may get unfair advantage. Second is that in some parts of the country, candidates who have criminal connections, they get ticket from the major parties. So criminalization of politics is also one very big problem. Then dynastic rule, families tend to promote their family members only. We can often see how the whole family member is MP. So this is how dynastic rule is also very much problematic for free and fair elections, and the real choice is curtailed. Then of course the choice to to ordinary citizens is also very less, because we often see that both parties, for example, two major parties in India, and both in practice and policies they are quite similar. So where is the real choice? Both are contesting elections, both are having similar policies and practices. So what is the real choice to the voters left? So this is one more challenge. Then a smaller parties and independent candidates suffer a huge disadvantage compared to bigger parties. This is always so, friends. So these are some challenges to the conduct of free and fair elections. So this is how we discussed. Yes, I skipped many things, and because this chapter was big, very big. So some things I skipped and some things I explained a bit less. But when we will be having online interaction, you will be discussing with me if you find any problem, friends. So don't worry if something I could not make it clear. Okay, so we will discuss it in the online session, friends. Okay, thank you.